It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Marcel Botha, founder and CEO of 10XBeta and an entrepreneur extraordinaire. Marcel Botha is an architect, investor, and entrepreneur, and at 10XBeta he specializes in guiding product development teams from concept to viable product and is currently locked in a wave of parallel experimentation. Marcel works to build expert multidisciplinary teams to solve unique complex problems by leveraging a global network of manufacturing partners and has developed hundreds of products over the years. Over the last 14 years, 10XBeta has helped numerous medical professionals test, develop, and commercialize products from a full range of surgical instruments. Marcel was born and raised in South Africa and attended Nelson Mandela University as well as MIT in Boston. He currently lives and works in New York City. Marcel Botha, welcome into the corner office.
Good day. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. Good to have you here. We're talking each other across the boroughs. I'm in Manhattan. I believe you're in Brooklyn today. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
All
You'll
right.
find me
Well,
in the Brooklyn Navy Yard on a good day.
all right. Well, we're both far from home. I knew that you were born and grew up in South Africa. I was born and grew up in California, and yet we're so close but so far away. But we had an opportunity to meet this summer in Oxford, of all places, at a wonderful one-week conference, and great to reconnect with you again. And I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit about our Moonshots experience, but we always like to start the podcast at the beginning. And for you, that would be, your homeland, where you grew up. Tell us a little bit about your early family life, brothers and sisters, mom and dad, and, what you did as a kid.
Oh, it was a wonderful childhood. I was
Mm,
born in '77. I'm the oldest of three. I have a brother and
nice.
sister, one of each. And I have my early childhood was mostly spent doing crazy things that wouldn't be allowed today. I had
Or you care to go into any detail?
Well, yes, I was an avid scientist from a very
Ah,
young age and
wow.
a budding engineer. And
Right.
my dad bought me a book for when I was 5 or 6, when I just started reading, called Home Experiments for Young Scientists.
Oh my
But
goodness. How fun is that? Jeez.
but this is not like today's STEM education
Right, right.
subscriptions or box kits. This had literally had all the steps to make, from a steam powered boat, which is on the modest
Wow.
and safe side, to how to make your own gunpowder
Gunpowder, yeah, right.
and build a fuse to trigger it with a remote detonator.
Oh gosh. I
So
love it. I love
it
it.
was
And you
a
did them
it
all,
was
I imagine.
yes, it was colorful. It was
I imagine.
I was easily bored. I was racing. I was doing a lot of adrenaline sports from a young age. I
Yeah.
did BMX racing from age 5. And I
Nice.
remember a scene when my kids loved the story, but I was in my little polyester motocross suit at home. I was age 7 one day, and I'd spent 3 days designing and building a dirt ramp in the backyard. We had a big yard, and was my mom would let me get away with building a ramp in the far corner.
I love
And
it.
I jumped over it 2 or 3 times, and I was like, this is so boring. I need to make it like a cartoon. So I built a bonfire, a giant bonfire and covered the wood in gasoline, the logs,
Oh my
and
gosh.
set it on fire. And then I jumped through the fire once or twice, only for my dad to arrive home in absolute, disgust. Like, what are you doing, kid? Because this little suit that I was wearing was not flame retardant.
Polyester. Yeah. Oh
It was
gosh.
ready to
And
go
it
up
didn't
in the
catch
flames.
fire, but it could have. That was the issue, right?
Could have, could have,
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
So
Oh, I love
I
it.
have this photo from that era, like when I was 6 or 7, wearing that same outfit that I jumped through the flames with. So I have it blown up in my office. So it reminds me, of the risks that we take.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, was your dad a scientist? What promoted him to provide a book of that ilk at such an early age?
My dad is a surgeon. He
Okay.
specializes in endoscopic surgery. He was one of the
Right.
pioneers of that field in South Africa in the 80s and 90s. But I come from a medical family. My mom was an
Right.
ICU nurse before she
Oh
became an
wow.
artist. My
Yeah.
dad was a surgeon. My grandfather was an inventor, architect, school teacher. A lot of the making comes from my mom's side of the
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Yeah.
All her brothers were in some mashup of engineering or design and commerce of some sort.
And no doubt
Um,
a few daredevils in there too, I imagine, right? That did that run
oh,
through her side of the blood?
very much so. I think it's on both sides. of the family loved speed and just the general impatience with the speed of the rest of society.
Yeah. Yeah. Cape Town, Johannesburg. What part of South Africa are you from?
I was born in a tiny town, and then when I was 8 or 9, we moved to Cape Town.
To Cape Town.
And
Right.
my dad was studying. He was finishing his residency to become a surgeon. My parents were very young. They were
Yeah.
21 and 23 when I was born. So
Wow.
by the time my dad was a very successful GP that then decided to study surgery, and that was a 5-year program. So by the time we moved to Cape Town, I was already a kid going to my teenage years, but my dad was a full-time student.
Right.
So
Right.
it was
Interesting.
colorful. It made
Yeah.
me sort of understand the early days of the value of a buck because I had to make my own money.
Sure.
And my dad encouraged me to, go and deliver newspapers and do things that make money outside the house because that expands the economics,
Right.
like opium, other people's money versus my
Right.
dad's
Right.
money.
Absolutely.
So he had interesting ways of motivating me to,
Encouraging that.
yeah, encouraging that. So it was the South African currency is rand. It used
Right.
to be very strongly correlated to the dollar and gold value.
Right.
Today it's extremely weak, but by comparison, but he would offer me 1 rand for every rand that I made from other people, whether
Wow.
it's
Nice.
washing cars or delivering newspapers or working in a store. And it
That's a
was
great matching program, huh?
it works. It works if your kid is not paying attention. But I very quickly made him regret his offer.
I
Um,
imagine. I imagine.
which today is a great story, but I think he didn't intend for it to have such a positive effect.
Oh, I love it. Were you a good student in school or too busy doing entrepreneurial things?
No, I was a good student. Well, let me rephrase that. I could have been a much better student.
Hmm.
I was, in most cases, I was really good in math and science,
Yeah.
so that came naturally
Right.
without much effort. So I could get straight A's or A's and B's for most things without trying. It was when I applied myself, that's when I really excelled.
Yeah.
Um, but I was also in a very academic school growing up, so um, but with doing very little, if you I did well enough to still be a great student. The things that I was passionate about myself, like the science and um, sort of mathematics, depending on the teacher, and art, I excelled in and got to sort of near 100% marks in those
Mm.
things when,
Yeah.
when I needed to. But um, I once remember an incident where I was in South Africa when you are in not that I think the 10th grade. No, is it the 10th grade or the ninth grade? I think it's the ninth grade, you still have to take biology and
Right.
geography and all these sort of non-elective subjects. And it was the last time I was going to write my geography, not, or no, it wasn't geography, it was history. It was a history exam. And it was the last time I had to do a history exam in 1991. And I was called into the principal's office. They were like, why did you go from 75, 80 to 96? Did you cheat?
Mm.
Percent. And I said, no, I just studied for the first time.
Oh, you finally got some interest in it, right?
Well, yeah. So yeah, I have a near photographic memory when it comes
Mm.
to consuming information. So
Right, right.
if I pay attention in class or I read something and take notes, I'm going to retain the
You get the
majority of that
attention.
information,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's one of my definitely good traits to
Superpowers.
have. Yeah, I don't know if it's a superpower just yet. I mean, adulthood and sleep deprivation with three small kids have definitely affected that. But
I can imagine.
it's yeah, I grew up a very curious child. Lots of
Mm.
Lego, lots of building stuff, lots of
Yeah.
inventing things. I was fascinated with James Bond, but not for James Bond, more for Q when I was a kid.
Yeah, all the devices, huh?
Almost got expelled out of school in the sixth grade for building a crossbow and taking it to school. And luckily,
Oh,
the principal was my neighbor's 2 doors down, and he observed the weapon that I supposedly brought to school. And he was fascinated. He asked me if I built it myself, and I explained the design to him. I explained that my dad helped me with the first design, but that wasn't a good design. I just had to wait for my dad to leave so I can build the better design, the prototype. And yeah, I was constantly pushing the boundaries, but
mm.
not in a I would say not in an anarchistic sort of
Yeah,
like
aggressive, negative way.
a
Yeah,
negative way, but it
yeah.
just rules are just made to be broken, and
Right,
I'm gonna
right.
learn something from that.
I love it.
So and that
Sports, do you have sports interests? You mentioned your BMX bike. Did you play team sports at all, or was it more individual stuff growing up?
I did both.
Yeah,
I grew up playing rugby until sort of like end of elementary school. I played field hockey. I played goalie or back. I did mountain bike racing,
mm,
both trail and downhill. I did
nice.
full contact karate for 11 years. That was my favorite of everything I did.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
was just shy of a brown belt for that, and it's something that I've been contemplating picking back up, but I would effectively have to restart because the last time I did it was in my 20s.
Right. Right.
And I also did a lot of road biking. I did
Mm,
about 20 miles a day before school every
wow.
day.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. Now you went on to Nelson Mandela University. Was it called that at the time of your youth?
So
Obviously, grew up during apartheid, right? And that changed while you were still living in South Africa, did it not?
yeah, so I
Yeah.
went to high school in 1990,
Hmm.
and that was so both Mandela was released, apartheid was abolished, and Mandela
Right.
became the president, all during the time that I was in high school,
In high school. Yeah.
and the
Right.
schools opened up. So I had
Right.
this
Right.
conversation the other day, and like just navigating as a high school kid, schools no longer being segregated, and it was
Right.
actually beautiful to see
Yeah.
how um, how the kids manage much better than the adults.
Mm,
We had no anxiety about integration. It was just your kids from another walk of life that are joining us, and if you can just have a conversation with them, you'll realize that you're actually not that different.
you have a lot more in common. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
same age groups enjoyed the same things, and it's we had I was in two different high schools during that period because I was in boarding school for 2 months
Hmm.
testing that out. But there wasn't a good fit with boarding school. It didn't really. Boarding school has too many rules because teachers and other adults are responsible for a larger group of children. So
Right.
I felt like it was more like prison
Yeah.
than a place that I wanted to be in. And also, they didn't allow me the freedoms that I had in living in the city.
Got it.
And being in a sort of like an urban school. And yeah, also it was I was in a co-ed school before, and then was an all boys school for boarding school that was focused just on rugby. And I went from being an average performer, like a high average performer in a very academic school, one of the top schools in the country, to the best academic kid in my class for 2 months. And I'm like, Dad, this is not the right place for me. And
Yeah, you had to learn anything. Right, right.
exactly,
So,
you need to be
so
challenged.
was the high school integrated or was college integrated then when you went?
High school was integrated,
High
both of those
school's
high
integrated.
schools from
Yeah,
92 onwards.
yeah.
And then college wasn't fully integrated. College was actually where the Nelson Mandela University, where I went, was one of the most progressive
Mm,
universities at the time.
yeah,
All the predominantly English speaking universities were more progressive than the Afrikaans universities at that time.
right,
I had options to go to Cape Town, University of Cape Town, or Stellenbosch, or Pretoria, and chose to go to the University of Port Elizabeth at the time, later called the Nelson Mandela
right,
University,
right.
um, to study architecture. And
Yeah,
it was between studying architecture and studying medicine, becoming a doctor. Those were the two main
yeah.
aspirations I had.
Why architecture? Tell us about your choice of behind that.
Well, I wanted to not do bog standard engineering. A lot of the engineering disciplines I thought were not creative enough. I
Right.
wanted to study product development or product design, but all the product design programs at the time were at sort of technical institutes, not universities.
Mm,
And I had a conversation with a couple of adults, like my dad and some of his colleagues, to really understand that if I wanted to go study internationally, what would be the minimum requirement in terms of education threshold. So
right,
I chose a school that was the highest rated sort of design program in architecture at the time, and that was my stepping stone for entering a
yeah,
career in sort of technical studies. It was one of the
right,
leaders in
right.
computer aided design at the time in the 90s in South Africa, and far exceeded most of what when I arrived in London in 2000. Definitely far exceeded what the international community were doing at architecture school level. But I
Mm,
knew from very early on, 97 onwards, that I was not going to stay in architecture. That it was my vehicle for entering
your
product
foundation. Yeah,
development
yeah,
and
yeah.
a larger focus on sort of like the design entrepreneurship, I should rather say.
Now, did you take a job in South Africa before coming over to the U.S.? Because I know you did some studies at MIT, or did you just continue on with your education and then begin your career over here?
I was a professional student for most of my 20s. That doesn't mean that it didn't work. So I, on
Right, sure.
average, worked about 100 hours a week every week of my life
Right.
during my 20s. But that was a combination of studies, part-time work, and entrepreneurship activities to pay for school.
Yeah.
And so I went South Africa, London. London was 3.5 years.
Right.
Milan, and Milan was a short stint at Domus Academy where I wanted to do a master's. And then a great friend, Trevor Hardy, in 2001, sent an email to four of us at the time. Three of us I think we were all in London at the time. And I was just in Milan for a hot second. And he said, come to MIT, come and see the 3D printing
Mm,
research that's happening at the Media Lab. And he was there on a Fulbright scholarship. And that was the bug that got me to get on a plane, go and check out what's
yeah.
happening at MIT. And I fell in love with the place.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just, and juxtaposed from 2 weeks earlier being in Milan at the Domus Academy, where I already had a master's position allocation. It was just a fantastic um, the dichotomy between the napkin sketches and cappuccinos in Milan and the hands-on deep engineering
Yeah.
research at MIT and the Media Lab.
You knew that
So
was your place. Yeah.
yeah, I knew that was home, at least, even if it
Yeah.
was a future home.
Tell us a little bit about the entrepreneurial activities that kind of, kept the glue, or rather kept you in school through all those years, obviously helping to finance as well as honing your entrepreneurial skills. What type of things were you doing? And was dad still matching a rand to a rand at that
Oh no, he bailed on that. He bailed on that system early on while I was in high school.
time?
There was a time that I was actually making more money than him in my high school years, and I sort of like had to sort of like kind of hide it or not
Right, right.
vocalize it. So, it's a
Yeah,
little
not
bit
not not
colorful.
be braggadocious. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it was because he was a student, right? Imagine a
Sure,
student
right.
with a
Sure.
TA or RA stipend. That was my dad at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
I've also been
right,
a TA with an RA stipend, but without kids. So
right. Yeah.
it
So you
was
have a
very
family
different.
raised. Yeah.
And
So what were those entrepreneurial things you were doing?
yeah, so I turned delivering newspapers in our neighborhood into a tiny
Yeah.
little I would say what would I call it? I optimized for scale. So I signed my siblings up for newspaper delivery, even though they've never delivered a single newspaper in their life. But just so that I could get past the threshold, there was a limit on how much one kid could deliver, and I figured
Sure.
out I could deliver at least three people's worth of newspapers in 1 hour before school.
Wow.
So that was my first sort of restructuring or reframing of the rules
Yeah. So they were your
uh,
first employees then too, your
they were
younger,
they were
your
they
your
were merely
siblings. Yeah.
proxy owners, and my mom was really impressed that I took them with me every Friday to go and collect the money at the newspaper because I was such a good brother. But I just bought them sweets, and then I collected all the money. And and then when that got older, like as a teenager, we were very much into mountain bike racing and
Mm,
buying and reselling bikes and bike parts, and that was fun for a while. But at university was when it sort of started taking off. I was the head of the student council or the architecture student council for my group
mm,
when I was at university, and the university had a lot of rules around how you're allowed to have a party and when you're allowed to have a party and what amount of your budget you're allowed to use to buy alcohol and to host a party.
right.
Basically, the standard money in, money out, like how much
Right.
you're going to
Right.
make, and the school was a notorious party school. So I figured out very quickly that I'm instead of going through the hurdles of having to ask for permission all the time, we'll merge throwing the best parties with also sponsoring um, all the costs, the capital outlay for setting up
Mm,
the party, and then also recoup all the profits.
there you go. Yeah.
So started doing that. Um, did some marketing work initially for Diesel Clothing, the clothing brand,
Oh
one
yeah.
of their subsidiary or franchise locations there, and then ended up having that fund some of my other colorful experiments. Ran a model building company before computer-aided design was a big thing
Yeah.
in South Africa. Physical architectural models were still very expensive to build because it's a lot of labor, a lot of precision. Our school, however, was one of the best model building architecture schools in the
Mm,
country, if not the best by far. And I was able to employ up to 7 students at a time to build models for the commercial sector.
wow.
And we would basically take the most expensive model building studio in the country and just cut their bid in half, and that was our bid. And so it didn't really have to dig into pricing models and marketing. We
Right.
were word of mouth. We could only do one of these big things at a time, but we had the tenacity to get it done while also doing schoolwork. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting time.
Right.
Paid for school that way myself from
Mm,
third year onwards, between the marketing job and the model building job. And what this did, it taught me how to do, really deal with the complexity of doing multiple things at the same time,
right.
but also gave me the budget to buy some of the best tools that the average student wouldn't be able to afford.
Mm, mm,
So that was my first foray into starting to build a little ecosystem of development around me.
yeah.
And then, yeah, fast forward to MIT. And in London, I did very little entrepreneurial stuff. I was really working nonstop. But um, when I arrived at MIT, it's an expensive place if you don't have a full ride scholarship. I
Right,
did
right.
receive an NSF fellowship, which was a fully paid scholarship in my second year based on the first year performance. But I was really worried in that first year. And then a friend called and said, listen, we have this consulting gig. It's kind of weird. We need an architect, somebody with 3D modeling experience, um, to come and help us figure out the silicon wafer manufacturing methodology or sequence
Hmm.
for a
Hmm.
new display technology that came out of MIT that was eventually sold to Qualcomm.
Hmm.
Now, I can't. I predict that I made about $80,000 from that job over the years that I was involved with them, but it was only working on Thursdays for 2 to 4 hours,
Wow.
and that paid for school.
Nice.
Sometimes it would overflow to Saturday mornings, but to
Yeah.
secretly disappear, from the studio on a Thursday afternoon and go and work in Andover, Massachusetts. Um, at the time it was, I was on F1, so you're not supposed to work.
Right.
And obviously
Right.
now I'm a citizen, so all that's forgiven in hindsight. But I
Yeah.
set up a company with my then partner, and it was just a consulting company that did patent consulting and innovation consulting for
Yeah.
whoever wanted access. If
That
I
was
did it
patents
now,
pending, correct? Or timestamp?
no, that was what was that? That was called Venbot.
Venbot. Okay.
Venbot. It was like the first consulting company that I did in the U.S. And yeah, it was
Right.
just paid for school. That's what it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Paid taxes, paid for
Fabulous.
school, maybe occasional
Right.
meal. And then yeah, patient spending was fast forward to 2009. But I'm skipping a step. So we out of MIT in my last year of MIT, I was pursuing a dual degree, so computational design as well as Media Lab degree. In my second year or start of my second year of the Media Labs program, I was already accepted for the PhD. I decided to leave early before starting the PhD and completing the second degree to start my first company with friends. I was effectively their first employee, and then we I became the COO of that company over time.
Mm.
But we had what was an IoT company before IoT was a thing. It was referred to as a Web3 company for social networking, um, social networking of pets and building
Oh.
the state classification and real-time connectivity solutions that allow you to track pets in real time. So it predates
Huh.
Foursquare, Facebook, Nike Plus, and all these fitness trackers that we have today
Right.
by 10 years.
Wow.
But we were a little bit too naive at that point on how we could chop up the technology and sell it to multiple stakeholders across multiple industries. We were just so hung up on on building this pet business, which
Right.
then was our investment that year was the biggest investment in the space by far, because it wasn't tracked yet. It was about $6 million, I think, that we received for building that company initially. Today or 2019, the last time I checked, it was 600 million a year. And
Wow.
so products like Phi and others were built on sort of they are simpler, cheaper versions of what we initially built in
Wow.
that space.
Wow. And
Left
was
that
it
company in 2000.
RFID technology, or what was the basics
Yeah, it was
there?
one of the first partnerships with TI and their new sort of active RFID chip. So it's a powered
Mm.
RFID technology, which
Right.
has
Right.
a much better broadcast range. And it was definitely a precursor to the BLE technologies that we know today.
Yeah. Fascinating. So, you kind of made some decisions along the way of starting your own businesses, being your own boss, and then going and work for others. Was that a tough transition? Because you've done that a couple of times, I think, over the course of your career.
Yeah, I'm not a good employee. I I think entrepreneurs joke that they are unemployable,
Right.
but I like to take ownership and I like to also share in the upside.
Yeah.
I'll do whatever it takes to succeed and get the job done, but I also want to share in the upside of what we're doing.
Right.
So if as an employee that's just collecting a paycheck, biweekly or monthly, I really easily get bored.
Yeah, become bored
and
very quickly. Yeah.
look at the next thing. What am I going to do? So when I was in London, while I said I wasn't that entrepreneurial, I did a lot of architectural competitions. I did every weekend. If I wasn't working, I would be working on an architectural competition
Hmm.
for submission, either product design or architectural design. And yeah, we did this AIDS clinic for the solution for mobile AIDS clinic for Africa for architecture for humanity. This was the end of 2002.
Hmm.
That was picked up by the UN. I think UN Chronicle wrote about it, and because we were not selected to win that competition, we got an honorable mention, but they felt that we were too critical of the South African government for how they were
Oh.
treating access to AIDS treatment at the time. This is
Hmm.
2002, so 20 years ago.
Right.
And then it was a blind um, judging. So when after they had decided that we were too critical, they also realized that we both, even though we were from the UK, both of the entrants were South African. And
Hmm.
obviously, then the organizers invited us out to New York, and I came to New York in 2002 in the dead of the winter season, like
Hmm.
November, December, about this time, and it was snow on the ground, and not really mentally prepared for how cold it is, how much colder it is than London at the time. But
Right.
loved it year. We're here for 3 days over a weekend, and just had it was a fantastic experience to be
Yeah.
part of that. And we did that often. We won a lot, and participated in every competition we could, won a lot of them. Always did it with a team um, that I've known for 30 years now.
Wow.
The guys that I went to undergrad with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so um, you, so it was this very successful, little
Camaraderie. Yeah.
think tank
Yeah. Think tank.
camaraderie that did these
Yeah.
fun things over
I
time. And
love it.
then our careers diverged. So all of us left architecture, went
Hmm.
into finance and real estate and solar and the entrepreneurship, but we're all still friends today. So
Yeah.
it's been an
Fabulous.
interesting time.
Well, tell us about 10x Beta. You've been doing this for about 14, 15 years. What led up to it? And then tell us a little bit about the company and your, current trajectory with it.
Yes, 10x Beta was really my own response to these entrepreneurial startup projects where I
Mm,
got bored and annoyed with the idea of having to build a new team every time I start a new company.
yeah,
So because it's a lot of energy wasted, and assuming that the talent pool is infinite is not a really, it's not really the truth. If you culturally and professionally work well with a certain group of people, you should keep working with them and keep building things with
that's
them.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So we
Well,
came out of
so many
doing,
CEOs and C-suites take people with them when they go to new organizations. I work in executive recruiting, and well, I always ask the question why they transition, and usually if they're in the C-suite, they say, "Well, we got a new CEO, and he brought in his team," and it happens, and it is a very ineffective way because you lose, I think, a lot of momentum when those things happen.
yes, totally. And I wanted to build, I came out of doing crowdsourced innovation in 2009, 2010 with some experiments with McDonald's and Starbucks and others in the ad
Mm,
industry where we looked at product innovation as it overlays with big brands. And I wanted to start a thing that was, framing sort of my sweet spot, always in beta. So 10x beta
yeah,
was born.
yeah. Okay.
And it and I sort of set out to do just a whole slew of parallel experiments across cancer diagnostics and more drug delivery adherence, um, and ad tech, automotive tech, aerospace, and over time figure out like what are the things that we love doing, what are the things that we find meaningful, and from a move from a generalist agency to a highly specialized agency doing medtech. And
Mm,
the big change for us was in 20 so 2019, it was probably my worst year ever professionally because I had to step out of working as an entrepreneur in this tiny, small company and dealing with a house fire that we had here in Greenpoint in Brooklyn.
Mm.
and being away from work. And if you're the primary biz dev leader for your unique skill set, and you suddenly step out, you also don't make money. So you
Yeah, the wheel
realize that
stops. Yeah.
yeah, the wheel stops, and suddenly, when you look back at the data, and like, oh shit, we lost $800,000 because I was out of the office 400 hours,
Yeah. Right. Right.
and some things need to give. But I was dealing with that house fire and that economic impact of that, and also came to great realizations that year. It's my first year meeting the group through which we met, Birthing of Giants. I
Right.
realized that I can't scale the company if I don't build the professional structures in place that allow us to scale. So I
Mm.
went and found a business partner and co-founder for the next stage of what we're going to build, which is the
Mm.
10x Beta Venture Studio. I narrowed our focus to medtech, um,
Yep.
and getting ready to do more of the stuff that we really loved in a space where we're adding outsized value. We won a big award for one of our drug delivery devices with the Publicis Health Garage. It was a $1.5 million
Awesome.
marketing prize.
Right.
And we were also on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies up until right before that point. So
Right.
it was a great moment. And then we entered the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. And then the pandemic hit the next year.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you're like, whoa, what are we going to do? And then within 2 days of getting ready to work from home, the mayor's office and the EDC contacted New Lab, and they said we need somebody to run the ventilator backup program for New York
Oh,
City. Who's going to
right.
do that? And
Wow.
New Lab said, it's Marcel. You've got to have him lead this. So we set up a
Yeah.
consortium of companies, 3 companies here in New York City, set up an innovation and manufacturing site where everything can be vertically integrated.
Mm.
And we were able to design a new ventilator and got to get it through FDA emergency authorization in 30 days. And we shipped
Wow.
and we shipped
Fantastic.
3,000 units to New York City. That
Wow. Wow. And that
validated
was early 2020, 2020,
everything.
2021.
Yeah, April
Yeah.
17th, we had succeeded already
Wow.
of 2020.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a lot of people got EUA approval or emergency use authorization.
Right.
Very few people shipped, and no one shipped at scale.
Yeah.
So we and that was set up in a unique way where we were treated treated the approach or the project as entrepreneurs. We retained the IP in the company, and
Mm.
the conversation with the city was, we will do whatever it takes to deliver in 30 days or around 30 days, but you have to change the way you interact with us as a new company with no history, because we set up a consortium, so 3 companies form one new
Right.
company for
Right.
this effort, and you have to transact with us in real time, because the average city, state, or federal bureaucracy will not pay you
Oh,
in real time for anything.
yeah. 30, 60,
So
90 days. Yeah. Yeah.
we spent $4.8 million on R&D in 30 days, and about $10 million in parallel with that on manufacturing over a course of 60
Wow.
days. So the project was done,
Wow.
start to finish, done in 60 to 90 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that company still, that consortium still in business today, or did you wind that down as the
So,
pandemic was receding?
so interesting thing is that we learned a lot of what was missing in the low cost ventilation space as an alternative
Right.
method for ventilation.
Right.
I expressed to the FDA's respiratory group that we will be back and we will file for a de novo application for this device. And last year we spent, last year and this year we actually miniaturized the technology down from a
Mm.
110-pound device on a stand um, to a 6-pound device that's portable, same technology, same control system,
Wow.
and we are now miniaturizing it for ambulance, ER,
Yeah.
and military field hospital use. So
Right. And field use. Yeah.
we should have it submitted for clearance sometime in 2023. But we're actively looking at how to button up that technology and sell it as a bolt-on acquisition
Yeah.
or as an independent
Yeah.
company. And 2 of the 3 original consortium members are still active in the company
Wow.
today.
So this is a real case study of what 10x Beta does. right? You identify a specific need, pull the resources together, and then make it happen in record time, or warp speed, as they say.
Yes, we are what Albert Kwan out of Stanford calls us the SEAL Team 6 of medical devices.
I
It's
love
like
it.
we're not big, we're 25 people,
Yeah.
but we are going to outperform Electronics and GE on a pure speed basis, and it's sort of like innovation speed basis every day, every
I
time.
love it. Are you having
And
fun? Are you keeping challenge personally and professionally?
yeah, I'm very challenged. It's like
Yeah.
we are going through a very interesting moment right now where we are taking this traditional service business and wrapping it into a formal venture studio. We're raising our
Wow.
first investment capital so that we can reinvest into our own projects and control the speed and access to capital while keeping it hyper lean.
Yeah.
And we have about 18 deals lined up for existing and future deals for the next 2 years.
Super.
So far
Super.
exceeding our original goal of just
Yeah.
5 a year.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, Marcel, we're just about out of time. This has been fascinating. I love the overview, but we always have one last question. We always ask all our CEO guests, and that's kind of what kind of career and life advice would you give someone that maybe has their eyes on their own corner office someday, like yourself, or the entrepreneurial tendencies to go down that road.
Yes, I would say that I don't sit in a corner office. I sit in the corner, but it's the worst part of the office. I
The view is better from there, right?
Yeah, my advice is, I tell it to my team, and some people will misinterpret this and as something bad. But for the early part of my career, it was very much a ask for forgiveness, not permission,
Right.
meaning that you have to really take some risk to
Yeah.
see what works, what doesn't work. If you're
Yeah.
waiting for somebody else to approve your idea, no one's gonna bother to do that, and no
Yeah.
one's gonna
Or
give
take the
you
risk.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
affirmation because being an entrepreneur is risky. If it wasn't
Right.
risky, everyone would be doing it. And then
Right.
second, you have to, your lifestyle needs to really be in pace, or ideally even not completely in pace with your entrepreneurial work. And like building companies, as most people who have done it knows, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. You're not living
10,000
large.
hours. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not living large day one, right? So
That's right.
you have cash flow is the only thing that matters if you're building a company
Yeah.
before anything else, because it doesn't
Right.
matter how valuable you are on paper. If cash flow is not in pace with your operational needs, then you will have to downsize or reset.
Right.
Or so for me, like you have to balance enthusiasm with getting the skill sets
Hmm.
to really be able to go at this yourself. And it's much better to do it with a business partner or a somebody that can share thought leadership and be a soundboard to where you're going versus um, doing it as a solo
Solo.
act
Yeah.
indefinitely.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
say this, after a lot of my career has been either being part of very small focused teams or being solo. However, the most successful companies in the space, I still think, are built by um, people who are not just on a solo mission, but who work as a team. And if
Right.
you can do that and build mechanisms for scale, you can balance family life,
Yeah.
work life and stress, and lifestyle to build valuable companies and enjoy every stage of it.
Mm. Amen. Amen. Marcel Botha, CEO and founder of 10XBeta, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.